from a stress point of view, the volcano was horrible. It was awful. It was for an awful lot of people the first time they'd been in the position of simply not knowing when they would get home. It was awful for the airports, for the airlines, not just financially, but in terms of the stress on their staff and their systems. But what I am hearing is that very much the lessons were not learned for the disruption that followed. This is Heathrow, as you will be aware, of course, Europe's busiest airport and the place which had more problems than any other. Here, the only bit of the airport that I could find working when I was there was the Salvation Army, who were dishing out tea and sympathy, which was in pretty short supply elsewhere. Extraordinary, the way that passengers felt absolutely abandoned. And that was not because they weren't online. I was going into all the terminals and people were there with their laptops or their smartphones. They were trying to get online. But people were being told, and this was at Terminal 5 particularly, they were just being told, go to ba.com. That will tell you what flights are working. Well, it won't. There was not the robustness in the system because, of course, everybody wanted to go online. They all wanted to find out if their flight was going. They were all doing that at once, building up by the tens of thousands every hour, people whose flights had not gone. And yet British Airways was hiding behind the website. And also, on the website, the default was, phone our inquiry line. And I met an American guy who had persuaded his daughter to spend hours on the phone trying to get through. 40 attempts she didn't, 41st she did. Your call will be answered in 593 minutes. You have to be active, not passive. I think if your systems were reasonably robust and unified, then a lot of people would have been happy customers. They would have been told either don't even think about coming to the airport, and that would have been probably by SMS. Everybody I talked to at the airport, every displaced passenger had a mobile phone. So tell them your flight isn't going tonight. Tell them we've rebooked you for 2 nights onwards. And tell them also, we know you're a passenger from overseas. Well, there are no hotels within 20 miles, so we've booked you one in Reading, and here's how to get to the bus station in order to get to your hotel. That delivers good customer service. I saw example after example of awful customer service, and this prevails even in non-crisis times. There's always problems, of course, in aviation, always have been. And all too often, the excuse operational difficulties is used. Now, as a passenger, I can imagine it's difficult running an airline. It's pretty difficult being on holiday all your life. But I want to know a bit more. And, of course, America is in many ways ahead of us in so many things. But I have not yet spotted a single UK airline which tells you, for example, that your flight is late. Well, they might tell you your flight is late. They won't say, by the way, have a look, because you'll see that the reason is, and websites such as Continental's do this, it just says your flight that is taking you from Detroit onwards to New York is the one coming in from Los Angeles, and you can track whether that's on time and make your own judgments. You can decide to accept that it's an hour late. You can decide to amend your plans and maybe fly to LaGuardia instead of Newark, or you can decide to abandon your trip because it's not worth you going there. But don't just tell me it's operational difficulties, please. And the appalling result was that people's happiest memory of Heathrow was the silver blankets, which were given out free, and the smiling faces of the Salvation Army. Remember that the messages that your organisations put out create the image that people have of you. This is a bit of hotel marketing, in fact, from Portugal. That's a bit of hotel marketing from Bexhill. So you perhaps might not want to stay there if that's indicative of how they treat people. Wouldn't happen somewhere like this. Of course, the great hotel in Manchester, the Hilton there. Oh dear, I met the Hilto. That was like that for 2 months, presenting a really interesting attitude. Of course, Britain has the image, perhaps, of not being as friendly as it might be. We have the wrong kind of villages, the wrong kind of sandwich companies, and indeed the wrong kind of burger bars. It is a tough time being a traveller, but you also form your views on what these organisations think of you. And importantly, people will not just think that this company is not I don't think has delivered good service. They will also communicate that to other people by the best of all communications methods, talking to them. Let me give you an example. There's so much talk about the environment, about ethical travel these days. And it's really easy to say, oh, we're green. We have low energy light bulbs. We recycle everything. However, the best example of, and of course we have all these marvellous green schemes. And in fact, these bikes, how many people have used a Boris bike in London? Ooh, well, next time you're there, you really should try it out because they are smart. This is absolutely harnessing communications technology. You just use your credit card, get a bike out, and then you turn up at Euston Station, take it back, and it says, oh no, there's no space here. Don't worry. Here's what you do. You press a button. That tells us that you're looking for somewhere to stay. We will not only give you an extra 5 minutes, but we'll also show you that just along the road there's another stable where you can put them back. Good unified communications. Even better is this, because it's interesting, about 1 person in 3 thinks that I'm Louis Theroux. It's true. 2 people in 3 think that I'm Nick Crane from the excellent programme Coast. I'm none of the above. So therefore I don't mind not being a proper celebrity, so therefore I don't open supermarkets, I open youth hostels. And I recently opened one in London. And this was such a neat idea in terms of creating the right message, communicating wisely. I turned up and said, and they said, oh, do you want a drink before we start? And I said, well, that's very kind, I'll have an orange juice. And they said, you can't. And I was just thinking, I bet they'd let Louis Theroux or Nick Crane have one. No, and they carried on, because actually you might not have noticed, but we don't grow oranges in Britain. However, we've got some lovely Kent apple juice, and we'll be delighted to give you one of those. So they were actually thinking about food miles, and that made me think, yes, they are being smart. Of course, sometimes people need something a little stronger, particularly the British, which is why we have perhaps a less than ideal reputation abroad. And can you believe it? This is how we are regarded in Quito in Ecuador. Because, of course, we've all become global travellers, partly because we have been empowered with guidebooks. For those of you who are younger than me, that's what happened before the internet. And they're actually still quite good. But they began with these 2 people, Tony and Maureen Wheeler, the founders of Lonely Planet. And they realised back in the 70s that there was a hunger for knowledge which simply wasn't being met by the existing books. So they created Across Asia on the Cheap, marvellous, no competition at the time, which was very good because it meant they could get away with an awful lot. For example, if you wanted to find out what the climate was like in Bhutan, you might research it and find out, well, actually, low altitudes, there's a monsoon between April and August. Higher altitudes, it's very, very variable. Or you could, if you were facing no competition at all, just say, like Nepal. Those were the days. Life is too complex. It was bad enough when we had phones. Starbucks reckon that this is something to be proud of. We have 87,000 drink combinations. Thanks very much. I'd just like a coffee with milk, and that will do me very nicely. There is an obsession with complexity. This, would you believe, is a toilet in a hotel room in Tokyo. And if your operation is beginning to look like a Japanese toilet, then it's time to do something about your operation. Of course, people will be communicating online. they will be increasingly communicating online from wherever they are. This is actually Funchal in Madeira about 6 years ago. They just put Wi-Fi everywhere, and that will become, I think, the norm. People get used to the idea that they can transact business any time of the day. In fact, in Buenos Aires, they can do it 25 hours a day. And people are looking for communication 25 hours a day, and they're not always getting it. So the two biggest cities in Europe, Western Europe, London and Paris, are, as you will know, connected by Eurostar from the world's most glorious station. It's not Milton Keynes Central, is it? It's St Pancras. And yet, even though this is a closed system, you can go anywhere you want to as long as it's Paris, Brussels, Lille, Calais, Bourges-Saint-Maurice or Avignon or Disneyland Paris. They still insist that we have tickets. It is frankly ludicrous that they should depend on paper tickets and all the complication that involves. Much better to have the unification that you see of systems as in Germany and Switzerland. And for this presentation, which, by the way, with my business partner Charlotte, I've been having all kinds of arguments about what's good and bad in communications and customer service. The old-fashioned forms of transport are doing really well. P&O just introduced a new ship on Dover-Calais. They just kept everything simple. Dover Port tells you P&O ferries, they say leaving at 10 to 2, absolutely fine. For some reason it takes an awful lot more space to say it in French, but there we are, that's up to the French. Couldn't be easier. The Underground. Now, I've got my BlackBerry here deliberately because the Underground, in my personal opinion, as a Londoner, as a user of it, is absolutely lousy. Let me just tell you what is not going to be working this week. They just sent me an email 2 minutes before we started. Service, of course, on the Circle line. District line closed anywhere between Tower Hill and Dagenham East. It goes on and on and on. No Jubilee line, Metropolitan line. It's awful. However, I feel empowered because I know it's going to be awful. They've told me in advance how awful it is going to be. And that is a really good position to be in. It means I can accept it's going to be awful. I can adapt my plan accordingly, or I can just abandon any hope. So the Underground has this extraordinary thing that it is a terrible, terrible system, and yet people will tolerate that. They will live with the inadequacies of what's basically a Victorian system if the communications is smart enough. A 1963 bus, I think, run by Arriva, very, very good legacy systems. The bus, anybody travelling by bus in London is empowered. They know what is happening and when the bus is likely to turn up. Oh dear, Milton Keynes, my goodness me. So, I thought it would be very useful to take my journey here from the point of view of somebody who's never been to Milton Keynes before, never had the good fortune to come to Milton Keynes. And it was quite instructive. So I booked my tickets online through London Midland, which was great. They have all my details. They didn't just send me, they could have sent me a two-dimensional barcode, which would have done as a ticket. Other train operators, particularly those owned by German companies, tend to do that, not London Midland. They sent me instructions which involved tapping in a combination of 8 letters and digits into a machine only after I've put my credit card in to prove it is me. So that added 10 minutes to the journey. They know all about me because I filled in all my personal details. They could have sent me an SMS saying, by the way, it's platform 12. They could have sent me an SMS saying, by the way, there's no catering on the train, so you might want to get a coffee before you go. They didn't. I still, unbelievably, made it to Milton Keynes Central. And I mistakenly thought, oh, Milton Keynes Central, that'll be in central Milton Keynes then, won't it? No, it won't. You have to then take a bus to central Milton Keynes. If you're lucky enough to be coming to Siemens to meet all these lovely people and enjoy their hospitality, well then you have a look on the bus map to try to work out where it is, which is fine. I don't mind looking at a bus. I can do buses. We're actually there.